The 60-year career of the great British cinematographer Jack Cardiff parallels that of cinema itself. A child actor in silent movies, he moved behind the lens as a teenager, working his way up the ranks to become an Oscar-winning cameraman. Even in his 70s, the ever-active Cardiff was shooting action movies and experimenting with the latest high-tech 70mm film formats. But he's probably most famous for his work on the films of Powell and Pressburger, who said of him his color photography would put the great master painters to shame. In the week that his autobiography is published and a month-long retrospective of his work begins at London's National Film Theatre, I spoke to Cardiff about his colorful life and the art of painting with light.
I love paintings. I adore paintings and I study the lighting. One could learn so much about lighting. All young people starting in the film business should study paintings. I've always said that.
One of the most striking passages in the book is your description of seeing paintings for the first time.
Ah, yes. Well, of course, it was a fantastic experience to me because I was only a child this high. And I had never seen a painting on a wall. And suddenly, I'm in a room like this, and there were all these fantastic colored paintings. And I believe that if they had existed today, these painters would have been magnificent cameramen. I've always loved this one here, which has, to me, everything one thinks of with lighting. It's got light and dark and chiaroscuro, whatever you call it. It's perfect. One light that just lights her, and then because it lights the back, it makes her face dark here against the light on the wall. It gives it terrific clarity and radiance, doesn't it? It's absolutely marvelous. Most of the painters used a front light, which was 45 degrees high, 3/4 high, say, and go on the face, making a shadow under the nose and under the chin and so on. See, the shadow is under the nose is exactly the same in this Rembrandt, and underneath I put Marlene Dietrich with this exactly the same lighting. You'll have to come in with the lamp first of all, because you see we're not getting a deep enough shadow. So if you come in another yard and put double the amount of diffusion on it, that's it. Now,
full flood.
Full flood, is it?
From humble beginnings as a 14-year-old camera assistant, Cardiff had become one of Britain's top camera operators by the time he was 21, shooting such legendary figures as Marlene Dietrich. And with youth on his side, he was able to embrace the biggest change to movies since sound, the arrival of Technicolor. How did your involvement with Technicolor begin?
Oh, it's funny, I was working as an operator at Denham Studios. We had about half a dozen operators, and they were choosing one to go to Hollywood to be taught about Technicolor, a new thing called Technicolor. And those who'd already gone in were coming out looking absolutely horrified because the questions were so technical and all about the inverse square ratio law and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, when I went in and they started with these questions, I said, well, I'm afraid I'm not your man because I know very little about the technical things. You know, the inverse square means nothing to me. And there was a shocked silence, and they said, well, how do you expect to get on? And I said, well, I love paintings. I adore paintings, and I study their lights and things, and I study the lighting. And then I left, and the next day I was told that I'd been chosen, which was funny because I was chosen because I said I knew nothing about the technical side of photography, but I just liked light and painting.
Cardiff quickly became Technicolor's new boy wonder, shooting their first British feature, Wings of the Morning. But Technicolor brought more than just color to the movies. Its bulky cameras, which utilized 3 separate strips of film, demanded new approaches to lighting and movement. And the company jealously guarded its industry monopoly, insisting it assign its own color consultants to all its productions.
At first it was kind of religious thing about color, that you couldn't have this, you couldn't have that. I was the enfant terrible Technicolor right from the beginning. And I would have a light coming through a window that was very strong, and it looked just like sunlight. I was very happy with it. Then an expert would come up and say, Jack, I just measured that. You know, that's 3,000-foot candles. I said, oh, all right, well, I'll take it down. And I'd take it down, and of course, I'd lost the effect. Yeah. So I said, well, forget it, put it back again, you know. So I was always doing things I shouldn't do. And after a while, Technicolor got used to it, and they became very helpful.
Eh bien, mon cher, comment ça va? Not too good.
But of course, the great thing about that film was the transition between color and black and white, with the roses changing.
When did you decide how you were going to do those?
Right at the beginning, that was in the script.
That's it, the only real bit of evidence we have.
Quick, we must not keep the court waiting.
Right at the beginning, when we were chatting about something, I did in fact say to Michael, by the way, I suppose heaven is going to be in color, isn't it? He said, no, the reverse. I said, why? He said, well, because people automatically think that it's going to be in color. I'm going to make it in black and white. Okay, now take it off. Keep going. Keep going. Oh, down a bit, sorry. Yes. One has to try this. Let's try it a bit farther.
To cover an area as enormous as the Heaven set, it must have been an extraordinary...
Yes, it was. It was my first film on a feature. You know, I'd done lots of little things, but this was big stuff. Of course, Alfred Junger was the art director, and he was very, very helpful. His sketches were wonderful, and I always kept very close, always do with an art director's sketches, because you can see the original idea.
There's a sequence that I've always wanted to ask you about, which is the dueling sequence in War and Peace, especially the long shot.
Yes.
Because it's a studio. It's another one of your amazing...
It was at Cinecittà in Rome, and we had this vast stage, which was vast, enormous size, like almost like a football field, but either from previous films or whatever, they had a spot rail, which was pretty low down. So we wanted an extreme long shot with a wide-angle lens of these two people shooting at each other in a duel. So it wasn't a brilliant thought. I just thought, well, it's pretty obvious. What we do is to have a piece of glass in front of the camera. And I asked for the paint that they'd use on the backing. And I painted the glass and sprayed it down so it just graduated into the real backing. So it looked like a sky backing. Then I put a couple of arcs spotted on like an aureole of light where the sun would be. And then I put a little lamp, a pup, behind the camera, so it was reflected in the glass where the sun was supposed to be. So it was a bright lamp that came out of it. Then I put fog filters on, and the first time I did it, the paint ran down, so that was no good. And the producer, Dino De Laurentiis, came on the stage and said, God, what the hell are you doing? I said, well, I'm putting a base. Well, you're crazy. I mean, went off the stage muttering. But he did like the shot eventually.
When you moved on to Black Narcissus, did you assume that was going on location?
Oh, yes, we all did, on the crew. You know, we used to wonder where Mick going to go for the location in India. And one day, he said, we're not going to India. We're going to do it all in the studio. We thought, well, that's mad, you know. But of course, how wrong we were, because it looked very effective. The actual palace was built in the grounds of the studios, and we had 3-ply mountains cut out of 3-ply.
One of the really striking things about Black Narcissus is when you see through a window in any of the interiors, the outside, the clouds and the sky look extraordinarily real and textured. How did you achieve that?
Well, they were mostly photographic backings that were black and white and colored with chalk, like blue in the distance hills, you know, and ochre in some of the foreground and green trees and things. And at first he was against it, but then we tried it and it worked very well.
In a film like Black Narcissus, there's a very interesting problem in that Technicolor can be used to make people look ravishing. And you take someone like Deborah Kerr. When it comes to Black Narcissus, she's playing a nun who has renounced sexuality.
I said to Michael Powell, obviously there should be no lipstick used. Usually you use lipstick, whatever happens, but in this case, that was défendu, so we took off lipstick. And funny enough, just the bare lips in that pink state looked too red in Technicolor. They looked like the, so we had to make up the lips with a sort of paler, almost flesh color, so we didn't see the red of the lips. And also, obviously, as I say, the very nature of the thing. Deborah had the perfect face, but she looked pure, in other words. She didn't look like a film star. There's some film stars that you can never make them look pure. Of course, no matter how beautiful, if you put the light in the wrong place, you can make disastrous things happen. I mean, if I put the light there, for instance, it brings out shadows on the face which are not nice. Of course, the camera would be crazy to use that lighting, but it just shows its possible, even on a beautiful face, you see. Then, of course, you can, for horror films, you can put it down here, and that's when she should scream, actually. I certainly, when I see a beautiful woman's face, I'd like to light it and like to model it and so on. I'd like so many faces at certain times, but the face which fascinated me, in essence, was Ingrid Bergman, because she had a perfect bone structure and she had intelligence, which came through the eyes. And she was a very beautiful woman. And also Marilyn Monroe, she had a face where she was almost like a mediocre artist who draws everything perfect, who draws every eye the same and the nose is exactly the right thing. Marilyn was rather like that. A lot of beautiful stars I knew, they would go out on the town the night before and come the next morning looking awful. That's when I had to punch the light in and put on diffusion and all the little tricks. Now put the different type of diffusion. It's a diffuser that was used by cameramen about over 50 years ago in Hollywood. It's rather nice.
When was the last time you used it?
Oh, I forget.
With someone and you needed to get rid of lines.
That's a good question. I mean, I said once to somebody that the camera lighting is rather like a sundial. That when a girl is young and beautiful, it would be high because she has no bags under the eyes. But as the years go on, she has bags under the eyes, and I know several who have, you know, in the film business. Then the lamp comes lower like a sundial. So finally, when she's really getting on, it's just right in the face without any shadows at all.
Right.
But don't forget, this is easy. When you get an actress in a scene who's like this to start with, and she gets up and walks down a corridor and climbs up the stairs, and bursts into tears and runs down the corridor again, you've still got to make her look beautiful. That's when you have to earn your money.